Over the course of 17 years, Mario Kart Wii has seen over 3,300 world records set across all 32 tracks. 21 of these tracks are split into two categories, unrestricted and non-shortcut, giving a total of 53 official world record categories. Each category has seen dozens of records set, and as time went on, some of these records stood much longer than the others on their respective tracks. But why did they stand so long? How were they viewed by the community? What was the competitive landscape like during the time they stood? And where were these record holders at the time? Did they ever try to improve their record? Were they so good that they didn't even bother? Or did they just leave the game altogether? All these questions and more will be discussed in this video. For this review, I will be referencing the official world record history on mkwrs.com, and we'll cover every official world record category, including unrestricted and non-shortcut. This will not include the alternative world record categories like Grumble Volcano Rock Hop and N64 DK's Jungle Parkway Spiral Skip. Also, for the unrestricted categories, for the sake of full representation of each category, I will be taking the longest lasting record following the implementation of the glitch or shortcut. That way, there won't be a long-lasting record performed prior to implementation, overshadowing its subsequent shortcut records. With all that said, these are the longest lasting world records on every track, on every category, in Mario Kart Wii. Kicking it off on Luigi Circuit, we have 108.774 by Cole, which lasted 1,404 days starting in November 2019. Cole really optimized Luigi Circuit to a point we never would have imagined. When Cole set this, the only other 108 on worldwide tops had just happened a few days prior by Casey, so Cole still had a lead of over 0.2 ahead of second worldwide, which on Luigi's Circuit is absolutely massive. Cole got exactly what he wanted on this track. After he got the 0.7 for the first time, he decided to just let it sit. Several months later, in 2020, he quit the game, so he was never going to improve it himself. Since Cole previously kept coming back to Luigi Circuit to improve his own record, this was the one that stood longer than the rest. That meant someone else needed to make up that deficit. This was viewed as one of the strongest world records of its time, so players didn't have much interest in trying to take Cole down, especially with the bounce cut essentially being required to compete at the top level, adding a lot of QM to a seemingly simple track. And even with 3 out of 3 bounce cuts, you still needed good chains to go along with them. With all this considered, it took a few years for others to catch up, but it was Casey who finally toppled Cole in late 2023. He initially tied this run, and then ended Cole's decade-long reign once and for all with the current record of 108.733. Over on Moo Moo Meadows, Sosis' 115.483 from November 2019 lasted 967 days, just short of 1,000. Moo Moo Meadows has been in the 115 range since 2011, the longest any track has gone without breaking a second barrier, so crossing the barrier into 0.4 was a pretty big milestone. When Sosis set this time, second worldwide at the time was Blaze with his former world record of 115.662 from 2018, giving Sosis nearly a 0.2 lead. Sosis was ahead of his time on Moo Moo Meadows for sure, and was really the first person to squeeze the most out of the drive-in. In particular, the way he does the second turn mini-turbo with only one rockback on the control stick set the pace for future competition. But at the time, Sosis was satisfied, and there were no other contenders because his driving became leagues above everyone else. It's also worth noting that Sosis is a player who's really good at defending world records, whether he gets beaten on the track or provoked by others, and I think that demotivates people after a while. Even a couple years after Sosis got the 483, Blaze was still second worldwide with his 662. Z-Cubed was the second person to beat Blaze in November 2021, but in 2022, Casey was the one to beat this world record with a 115.441. However, Sosis came right back. Neither Casey nor Logan were allowed to hold on to it very long before he put Moo Moo Meadows firmly back in his hands. Heading to Mushroom Gorge, we have 26.769 by Sam, set in 2015. For a track that has had a virtually full glitch history since 2008, 576 days is an incredibly low total to be the longest lasting record, and I have a theory why that is. There are several world records here that lasted between 400 and 500 days, and I believe this speaks to the steady evolution that Mushroom Gorge has undergone through the years, and this one just happened to outlast the others. Sam was the first player to evolve the category beyond the standard cookie strat from 2010 by continuing the rock ride into the last turn lap 2, and then with his 26.769, he was the first to ride the rock all the way to the finish line lap 2. In 2015, this was definitely seen as the most impressive strat done RTA, even if it foreshadowed what the track would become today. With this evolution, it was simply a battle between Sam and Kenny. Anyone else playing Mushroom Gorge Glitch would generally grind for 1 or 2 cookies and then call it a day. When you combine that with the Wii Wheel requirement, you have very few contenders at the top. Sam continued playing for a few months, but gave up when DK's Jungle Parkway and Sherbetland glitches were found, and with Kenny on hiatus, this record continued to stand. But in 2016, Kenny made a surprise return 4 years after his last world record with a 26.009. And even after the crazy progression to staying on the mountain the whole time, this time is still 6th worldwide. On the no shortcut side, we have 141.256 by Blaze, set in 2018. At 706 days, this is also on the shorter end, especially for a no shortcut category. Fox had back-to-back 600-plus day records from 2013 to 2017, which broke up his individual record duration. I think similar to the glitch category, this relatively lower duration also is due in part to the steady evolution that this track saw, with the gap jump variations, the inclusion of mushroom skips, the eventual implementation of hopless gap, boost panel strats, and then the outward drifting bike revolution. Blaze excelled at many tracks in his day, and this quickly became one of them. He was the first to implement mushroom skip into world records, and over the course of a few months, it gave him a sizable lead of about 250 milliseconds over Fox's 141.507. Fox had mostly disappeared from time trials at this point, and his 507 stayed second worldwide for a long time. Jazz seemed to disappear as well after having the record briefly, so there weren't really any contenders anymore. Blaze was satisfied with this time, especially with a big lap 2 best known split by about 75 milliseconds at the time. His best splits gave 140.944, so there was potential for more, but he didn't feel anyone competing with him. The reason this record didn't last longer was because of the hopless gap revolution that occurred in 2020. It was then that Blaze was challenged for the first time. Blaze began playing this track again when Luke started getting close with hopless gap. He improved his own record in 2020 to a 141.248, but it didn't use hopless gap. A day later, Luke took over, solidifying hopless gap as the new meta for Mushroom Gorge No Shortcut. Of course, that meta wouldn't last forever because of the outward drifting bike revolution in late 2024. Moving on to Toad's Factory, the current world record is the longest lasting of the box clip category. Logan has it with a 144.178, and it has lasted for over 500 days so far since September 2023. This category has a much shorter history, only spanning back to late 2019, and the only reason why the longest duration isn't longer is because Logan continuously keeps improving it every so often. Since 2020, Logan has come back periodically to improve his time whenever he feels like it. While the box clip itself isn't obscenely hard like other glitches are, Logan's consistency is far above anyone else's. He also has the no shortcut record, so his driving is also unmatched here. When you combine his high clip consistency with his driving ability, he's an unstoppable force. No one is even close. Anyone else who plays the track today is just aiming for second place. Logan still plays this from time to time, but now that the track is approaching 143, it's getting more difficult to improve, especially with that recovery on lap 2, making sure you stay on the green conveyor without hitting the red. This is a tricky maneuver for anyone. He currently has sights on implementing the cycle skip, which involves driving a fast lap 1 no shortcut, clipping an earlier box on lap 2, getting a frame-perfect bounce and wheelie off of the out-of-bounds into the factory, driving a fast lap 2, and then clipping the normal box on lap 3. This would bring the record down to at least a high 142. With that goal in mind, I don't believe he has any intentions of improving with the current strats anymore, so this will continue to stand until he implements the cycle skip. I don't believe anyone else is touching this time with the current strats, and I don't think anyone else is crazy enough to go for cycle skip, and if they are, the driving standard won't be good enough to fully pull it off. So if and when he does get a run with cycle skip, that run will surely eclipse this one in duration. On Toad's Factory No Shortcut, Luke's 149.326 from March 2018 reigned supreme at 735 days, just over 2 years. Toad's Factory has always been an active track, so I think that's why none of the records have gone the distance duration-wise. This was Luke's second world record track after Mario Circuit 3, when he applied himself more to regular tracks after previously playing custom tracks. Fox had a 149.537 from 2016 that stood for a long time, and the community had a very high view of that time. But then Luke came onto the scene and brought that time down by over 0.2 in the span of a few months, even skipping 0.4 in the process. As impressive as we thought 0.5 was, 0.3 was insane to see. And I think the most impressive part about this time is that it really doesn't do anything differently compared to previous records. He just had exceptional driving for the time that set him far apart from everyone else. When Luke got the 326, it was kind of underwhelming considering it was only a 7 millisecond improvement over his previous record, paired with the half chain on the lap 3 straight. With a full chain, the run could have been a 149.2. He had an end goal of 149.2, but this time was very close to a sum of best splits. He ended up leaving the track where it was. A month before Luke got this time, Fox had improved to a 149.411, but he stepped away from the game shortly after. Barney then came the closest to challenging Luke with a 149.385 he set in October 2019. Funnily enough, it was the box clip discovery in late 2019 that inspired Luke to play No Shortcut again after he got a world record with the box clip. Within a few months, Luke improved the 326 himself to a 324, quickly followed by a 149.245. Without the box clip discovery, his 326 probably would have lasted a fair bit longer considering the leap he had, but at least he got the 149.2 that he was going for 2 years prior. We move on to Mario Circuit, where we have Guy with his 53.592 from January 2015. This lasted nearly 4 years, and it's pretty easy to see why. This record was the first and last of its kind, doing the right side glitch and 2 no-stop glitches going into laps 2 and 3. This record was massive when it was set. It cut over 2 seconds from the previous record, undoubtedly demoralizing anybody from wanting to take a shot at it. He did try to improve this time for a little bit, but he got bored, did a random no-glitch run, and the rest is history. The no-stop tree method is so ridiculous to pull off not just once, but twice in a run. It's so dumb that a song was made centered around it. So barely anyone tried it because it created a huge mental block for people, while also creating the perception that it was close to perfection. Players definitely cut the lead down over time. Hunter, Esteloy, and Rob got some pretty nice times in the top 5, but David came the closest with a 53.637 from July 2018. But the reason this got improved was due to the task clip that ended up being a lot easier and faster to pull off. The record was finally beaten with a 53.091 by Bryce. And we have Guy once again on the no shortcut side. His current world record of 120.357 is still standing from 2021. This run came to fruition when Logan and Casey were nipping at his heels, so Guy decided the best way to deter the competition was to go for something no one else would ever want to try. 3 out of 3 King Alex's. A lot of people say this is overdue to be beaten, and maybe it is, but I'm honestly not shocked that it's still standing. Those who remember this happening probably know that this was streamed on Twitch. Guy was mic-less the whole stream, and when he crossed the line, he gave one of the most legendary reactions I've ever heard. I called him on Skype right after because I knew how huge this was for him, and I distinctly remember saying 2 phrases. The first one was, "You just killed Mario Circuit," which I don't regret saying because I don't think it was that far-fetched. The second one was, "Who is going to want to try to beat this?" People have tried, but I think there's still a lot of truth to that. With all that said, this run does have its flaws. A few months after this was set, Casey got a 120.451 that didn't even get all 3 King Alex's. But the last I recall, Casey is not stoked on playing this track, even though he has a ton of potential to beat the time. Big Pork and Susio Rap could also do it, but I think the standard that was set by this run really put a downer on people's motivation. To beat this time, you'd either have to fluke a run or be prepared to grind many hours like Guy did. Also worth mentioning, Guy did quit the game in April 2023, so when this gets beaten, it will be by someone else, and whoever does will end what's currently the 2nd longest world record reign of all time. Heading to Coconut Mall, Takemi's 32.346 lasted 1,304 days starting in May 2013. It kind of blows my mind that this was done in 2013, and it's still a very solid time with this entry here. I think only 4 people beat this time before the new entry was implemented 10 years later in 2023. This time was really good and lasted this long for a couple reasons. On lap 1, Takemi missed the wheelie off the escalator, causing him to do a no mini-turbo glitch entry, which ended up being faster and became the standard years later. This paired with a really strong parking lot before the 95% rule was properly understood, set him far apart from everyone else. Even a few years after Takemi set this time, it seemed like no one could beat him. The run certainly seemed like perfection. This time led second worldwide by over a full second, and with this time being a substantial improvement over the previous record, I'm sure Takemi was perfectly fine leaving it alone, although he was spotted playing it again in 2016 through a couple Twitter posts. Over time, Breekson and Justin began breaking down the parking lot drive-in, and they both had 32.6 times in 2016. Justin's strong parking lots made him the frontrunner to beat Takemi in 2016. However, his lap 1s were holding him back. While taking a break from DK Jungle Parkway glitch, Breekson played Coconut Mall again and improved directly to a 32.273, beating Takemi and making for one of his most shocking improvements he's ever had. On the Coconut Mall no shortcut category, Yasha set a 156.821 all the way back in March 2011. At 1,167 days, this was the longest lasting world record in Mario Kart Wii history for a few months in 2014. This lasted as long as it did for a few reasons. Yasha and Chaos were so far ahead of everyone else, third worldwide was about half a second behind. Yasha was always good at this track ever since 2008. He had the first 159, 158, and 157 here. Even through 2018, he was still setting records here. Chaos didn't come back to Coconut Mall because his only goal was to get the first 156. After achieving that, he lost interest and switched over to Toad's factory and never tried to reclaim the record. That left Yasha unchallenged when he reclaimed the record himself. I'll also offer this reason why it lasted so long, which I don't think gets talked about enough, because something very significant happened 4 months after this run. The Ultra Shortcut was found. Back in the early days of Mario Kart Wii, no shortcut categories didn't have as much emphasis as they do today. It was mostly placed on the glitch categories. There could be a couple reasons for this. One may be the WFC top 10s, and the other being the players page having unrestricted categories as their main leaderboards. Ultras also weren't widely celebrated the way they are today. The tracks as a whole were mourned instead, probably because of the looming prospect of people doing the glitch online to get a cheap win. All this aside, when the Ultra was found, it was the only thing the time trial community was playing. The focus was completely shifted off of no shortcut, and I think that's a big reason why Yasha's record stood so long. A similar situation happened on Wario's Gold Mine. Sro's 152.231 from 2009 was set a day before the Ultra was done RTA, and went on to last over 400 days, also being the longest lasting world record for a time. None of this takes away from how great this run is though. Lots of people struggle to get a time like this today with updated strats, and it wasn't until May 2014 when Sean Tanny set a 156.787 in 2014. We now head to DK Summit with Blake's 146.121 set in February 2016, which lasted 635 days. I was surprised that this was the one that stood the longest rather than, say, a 145. I was also surprised at how low the duration was compared to other no-shortcut categories. But I think similar to Mushroom Gorge Glitch, this is another example of a track that has steadily evolved, mostly around the double cut. As the double shortcut changed over the years, it became more technical, creating a lot more room for improvement compared to the original double shortcut. Blake was the best by far at what we call the Jimmy strat, named for the player who first performed a variation of this cut in a flap record, although that flap record was found to be cheated later on. Nancy was the closest competitor at the time with a 146.270, but seemingly left the game. No one else was close, so DK Summit was a battle of Blake versus the 145. Blake's 146.121 was recognized by the community as the cleanest DK Summit run since the Jimmy cut was discovered 3.5 years prior. However, His shortcut on lap 2 was considerably weaker than the others. After setting this record, Blake was hard at work trying to get that elusive 145. He just needed to clean his shortcuts up, and it was his. A few weeks later, though, Blake got the pace of a lifetime. He got two 35.1 laps back-to-back, but then failed the moguls on lap 3. He was devastated, and he rage quit the game for 4 years. In his absence, the 146.121 continued to stand through a period of general game inactivity. A new challenger had to rise up. In late 2017, Connor began making his mark on DK Summit and achieved his first world record with a 146.017, eventually getting the first 145. Activity picked up again when Blake finally returned in 2020. Now we have the current longest-lasting world record in Mario Kart Wii history, and it's held that title for over 10 years. You all know it, it's Mr. Bean's 32.818 from 2011. It lasted 2,245 days, which is over 6 years. When this was set, no one thought this would last this long. But I think Enmade said it best in his most iconic world records video why this did last so long. But to summarize, the method of stopping, turning, and immediately shrooming and spin drifting to get fast pipe bounces, as if they weren't hard enough on their own, is not something people wanted to deal with, so this category didn't get played too much. And that's why it didn't matter what character Mr. Bean used, because he was simply the best at doing it. I think it's awesome that he used Luigi just for the reason that Luigi was his favorite character. It makes this time that much more iconic. Mr. Bean didn't plan to leave the track here. He knew he could improve it due to some of the driving errors, but he ended up letting it sit. As far as any competition goes, McGraran set a 32.913 shortly after Mr. Bean's time, but he seemed to disappear after that. I thought I recalled Mr. Bean playing this on stream several times while this stood, but I don't think he played it long enough to get any improvements. For the most part, he just took a long hiatus, but during a live stream in 2017, Mr. Bean himself improved the time to a 32.641, unprovoked by any competition behind him. I guess it was just the time to beat this long-standing record once and for all.
Oh yeah! Thank you!
Over to No Shortcut, set much later than Mr. Bean's time, we have Vincent's 150.579 from June 2019. This is generally considered by the community as one of the strongest no shortcut records ever set in Mario Kart Wii. It lasted 951 days, but had the revolution not taken place in 2022, it would have lasted much longer for sure. Aside from this record's strength, Wario's Goldmine no shortcut was a very optimized category, very closely approaching the best known splits. This run was around 110 milliseconds off of the best known splits, and Vincent had all 3 of them, which means everyone else's potential was a fair bit lower than his. Luke was slightly less than 0.1 behind this time, but even then, he didn't really make a push to beat Vincent. Everyone else struggled to even get a 150.7. The skill gap here could be attributed to the community's general struggles with soft drifts. The double mini-turbo strat on laps 2 and 3 in particular required super soft drifts. Luke and Vincent had super soft drift experience from Mario Circuit 3, which left everyone else behind. People would have needed a couple years to catch up to their level. Despite some mistakes on lap 1, Vincent was extremely proud of this run, and didn't try to beat it once. He told himself that he wouldn't play it again until he was beaten. Times like this that are so close to their maximum potential are special, and it's no fluke that a time like this went the distance, and surely would have gone farther if the strategy stayed the same. This probably would have been beaten today if that were the case, but the track changed in early 2022. Luke beat Vincent with a 150.573 using the beginning turn skip on lap 1, and Justin introduced the detach method a few days later, making the track virtually unrecognizable from what it once was. The category went down by over half a second in less than 3 weeks, making Vincent's 150.579 suddenly seem like a distant memory. On Daisy Circuit, Luke's 128.425 from August 2019 lasted 1,127 days, a little over 3 years. When this run was set, Luke had a lead over second worldwide by nearly 0.5. It would still be second worldwide today if he hadn't improved it since then. And even now, third worldwide is still a 128.7. Notably, this run only had full dives on laps 1 and 3, but lap 2 was still very cleanly driven. Even the current record isn't a 3-dive run, which speaks to how inconsistent getting dives can be. They've never been as easy as they look. At top level, dives generally happen somewhere between 1 in 3 and 1 in 5 attempts. It varies depending on your shroom timing and general approach to the shortcut. But in addition to dives, strong driving is just as important on Daisy Circuit, and Luke ushered in a modern era of Mario Kart Wii world records with this run. As mentioned previously, Luke had experience with super soft drifts that very few people had at the time, allowing him to save lots of time on many of the mini-turbos in the run. In particular, the super soft drift outside of the tunnel allowed Luke to take a more aggressive line towards the hairpin turn after, further contributing to his time save. This helped put him far ahead of Firestone, who was always in the mix, having held record before, but was unfortunately left behind with Luke's activity. This was truly an instance of no one else being close, and this is a very memorable run for Luke. Despite missing a dive, this was exceptional for its time, and the community thought this would last a lot longer. But in 2022, Logan managed to cut down the lead, and he beat Luke's time by 1 millisecond. Moving on to Koopa Cape, in a category with a history that only spans from 2021 onwards, Lawrence's current world record of 155.250 is the longest standing from May 2023. At over 650 days, despite the shorter history, this record has lasted longer than any of the no-shortcut world records, but more on that later. The first couple records in 2021 lasted a while because Koopa Cape glitch was still marked as an immensely difficult glitch. But in August 2022, Lawrence opened everyone's eyes to a different setup that made entries a lot more consistent, and from there, the floodgates opened. It was Justin's 159.751 that initially blew everyone away with how fast you can ride the seam, turn around, and shroom for the respawn. Now unfortunately, this run was pause-assisted, so it was eventually discounted as a world record. However, that run set the benchmark for others where the track can go. It was then that Lawrence and Cabe battled it out together in 2023, and Lawrence has been on top for nearly 2 years now. He was also the first to do the glitch on lap 2, so he was the main pioneer and innovator moving forward. Even today, it's still these two separated from the rest of the pack. Most people who play this category don't have their sights on the lap 2 glitch or a lightning fast turnaround, so they either aim to simply get a glitch run, maybe third worldwide at the most, and then call it quits. A couple months after Lawrence's time, Kay set a 155.744, but seemingly gave up soon after. Having seen this, Lawrence gave this some tries again towards the end of 2023, but didn't improve, and now he hasn't touched time trials in a long time. This would leave Kay as the most likely candidate to beat this, or if a new glitch strat is implemented, maybe the category can still be blown wide open. I still see more to go based on this run, but the category is definitely at a standard where there are very few contenders, and those who do contend will have a difficult time beating this run. We'll just have to see what happens next. On the no-shortcut category, the longest-lasting world record is a 219.840 by Totem, which was set in late 2013. This was another surprising one to find out that it was the longest lasting, and only at 645 days. Like Mushroom Gorge Glitch and DK Summit, Koopa Cape has undergone many strategy changes, which is why I think the duration is this low, relatively speaking. And no matter what strats were used on Koopa Cape, it's always been an awkward track to perfect. The first ramp landing, the slip drift after the wooden ramp, the precise line needed entering each lap, all made this track rather unpopular and with tons of variants. And that doesn't even factor in the shroomless cuts and the Mander strat leaving the pipe. All of this created frustration for all players at any level. Johnny actually had the first 219 here, which I don't think a lot of people remember because it didn't last particularly long. Most people just remember Totem for being really good at Koopa Cape. But Totem's run was incredible when it was set, because it was the first record that looked clean and consistent. The quality of the run definitely made it intimidating for others to contend with. I think this one ended up lasting the longest because of the time period in which it was set. Mario Kart 8 had come out the following year in 2014, which definitely ate up a lot of activity. I also think Totem was just satisfied with the 219 and was content leaving it where it was. Another point of interest lies with Mander's cheated time of 219.473, which was from 2010. While many had suspicions of that time, we saw it as the record at the time, and it became the benchmark of what players would eventually aim for. The closer Koopa Cape was pushed towards that run, the stronger the run was perceived by others. This was the second to last world record to use the abbreviated form of the shroomless cut, which is the one that Cole had first implemented in late 2009. The variation of the cut that cuts off more of the turn was implemented in 2016, which brought new life to the category. While this run stood as the record, the worldwide top 10 definitely tightened up a bit. I believe 10th worldwide was a 220.5 by the time it was beaten, but no one was quite able to reach the mark. And Totem had quit around the middle of 2015, so he wasn't going to improve the record himself. Someone in the newer generation of players needed to step up, and that's what Fox did in September 2015. He beat this run with the same strats with a 219.817. Heading to Maple Treeway on the glitch side, we have Demon's 158.144 from June 2016, lasting 687 days. This was another surprise to me when I realized this was the longest lasting here. I could have sworn it would have been his 157, or even one of the 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 3 records. It's clear to say that Maple Treeway is Demon's track, and the glitch category is where he really started making a name for himself in 2012, and he was so far ahead from the get-go that some people thought he cheated. I managed to snag second worldwide here just after the discovery, with Demon ahead of me, and some people actually congratulated me on the world record, and I had to tell them, no, Demon is legit, he is just way better than I am. Shameless plug aside, while he has the current record today, his dominance was strongest when the record only did the glitch 1 out of 3, because there was a ton of driving skill required, and Demon was by far the best at driving it. But not only that, he completely mastered the glitch. You really can't do it much faster than he did. With all that in mind, no one else was even close to him. I think Fox was the closest with a 159.5. Demon probably could have left this track at any 158, and it would have lasted until the One Shroom Revolution. A big reason why this record lasted so long is Demon was starting college. As much as he wanted the 157, he was working out his priorities, both in-game and in real life. In-game, he chose to prioritize the no-shortcut category, since he had more immediate competition with Kisaragi nipping at his heels. It was also just a really strong run that he knew would be extremely hard to improve. As for why none of the future records lasted as long as this, I think as the track evolved, there was constantly more room for improvement, and the record got improved so often because more people were able to contend with it, whereas Demon was on an island of his own during the 1 out of 3 days. Once he hit his stride in college, he came back to the glitch category after his final exams, and set a 157.925 in 2018, which would stand until the One Shroom Revolution took place later that year. And once again, we have Demon on Maple Treeway No Shortcut. His current world record of 213.126 from mid-2022 has the longest duration than any other record here, and it just surpassed 1,000 days. It's the first record to do so here. Just talking about Demon's levels of dominance on Maple Treeway, I don't think any no-shortcut category has seen anyone quite as dominant as Demon. It's seriously hard to believe that anyone could beat him. This cut almost a full second off his previous record, and it gave him a lead over second worldwide of over 2.5 seconds. That would be unfathomable for any other category. This also brought Demon within 0.8 of the best-known splits. For a track that's as unpredictable as Maple Treeway, taking the turn skip into account, that's ridiculously strong. This is due in part to no one else really doing turn skip runs for a world record. Some people just go for one turn skip to get a quick top 10 time or a player's page improvement, but Demon takes this many steps further. Demon is the type of player who sets his goals extremely high, and even if it takes a few years, he achieves those goals. It doesn't matter if he already has the record, or if he's seconds ahead of the record. He pushes Maple Treeway to its absolute limits, and no one else has that mindset here. This is the first 3 out of 3 turn skip world record that's really solid and pretty much cemented his place on top if nothing else did before. Demon continued playing this for a couple weeks, and then he lost motivation, and I don't blame him for doing so. He let it sit while switching over to the glitch side, and in August 2024, Flare hit a 214.007, so it took over 2 years for another 3 out of 3 turn skip run to happen, and the gap is still about 0.9 for Demon. Even today, Demon's driving and turn skip skill are unmatched. And the craziest part of all this is, he still wants more. Ever since Flare got his time, Demon has been back to work on No Shortcut and is actively going for a 212. He knows he has time save from the missed triple net on lap 3. And with that said, this could be improved sooner than we think, but as for now, it makes complete sense why this is still standing. This was the 3 out of 3 run that Demon was striving for the longest time, and he definitely deserved a break after getting this. But like I said before, he always achieves his goals. He will get a 212, it's just a matter of when. For Grumble Volcano Glitch, I think most people know this one, it's 19.300 by Niyaki. It was set in February 2012, and it's the 4th longest lasting record of all time at 1,786 days, nearly 5 years. A few reasons why I think this stood so long. First, Grumble Volcano has always been an underplayed category for the glitch side. So underplayed that Chaos's old world record of 20.113 from 2008 stayed on worldwide tops for nearly a decade. Second, the only other contender really was King Alex, and he stepped away from the game in March 2013, so that left Niyaki all by himself. Third, the shroom that Alex implemented on the Rock Lap one was something no one really wanted to mess with, especially if they weren't at a world record level. And fourth, there's something called the Niyaki effect. Niyaki's always been on Grumble Volcano since 2009, and he has always reclaimed the record whenever someone took it from him. No one wants to compete with him because it's basically a guarantee that he will beat you back. Despite leaving the game before, King Alex did make his return, and he beat Niyaki's time with a 19.259 in January 2017, which really surprised the community. This, of course, was before Quacker took over, and the Niyaki effect is still in full effect today. Now we come to the oldest record being covered here. Chaos's 153.126 on Grumble Volcano No Shortcut was set in September 2010, and it lasted 983 days. People probably still wonder why a 2010 record here lasted so long. From my observations in 2010, this was not an official category, or even through most of 2011. This never got the same recognition that Mushroom Gorge and Wario's Goldmine did. The major no shortcut category that we recognized in those days was the Rock Hop shortcut. This would later be redefined when a rule set was determined by the players page in 2011, but even then, it seemed like the community didn't fully adjust until around 2013. So I believe this lasted as long as it did, because only a few people played this. The first time I ever heard of this category was when Inviso uploaded a 155.8 in August 2009. And back then, we knew it as No Glitch and No Shortcut, rather than just No Shortcut. The only other person I really saw times from was Chaos, and this time was a really big improvement, over 0.8. If people played this, it was just for fun. It was more of a novelty category, if you will. So when Chaos improved by that much, everyone else pretty much backed off. A very similar case can be said for Bowser Castle 3, where there was really only one true category until 2011, and the no shortcut history was just filled in later. As for the run itself, it's actually quite good. Chaos was an all-time great in the early years, so it's not surprising that he set such a strong run here, and it likely would have lasted long anyway if it was more active. Once the category received more attention, and eventually became the official no shortcut category, more people started playing this. And it was still difficult to contend with because of the track's inconsistencies, especially with the shroom here. The one to finally beat Chaos was Fox, with a 153.069, which was the first of many world records he would set in Mario Kart Wii. Next up, on Dry Dry Ruins, we have Infi's 147.498 from May 2014, which lasted 1,420 days. If I had to make a short list of records that were so incredibly far ahead of their time, this would absolutely be on it. The community saw this as an absolutely insane record, and this is still insane for the strats used. In early 2013, Infi got the first 147, and through the following year, it was only Infi pushing this track down by himself, all the way down to this point 4, before anyone else even had a 147. This run doesn't actually use any new strats, but he did flip back and forth between doing the shroom cut into lap 2 and into lap 3, depending on the pokey cycle after the bridge on lap 2. He just did everything better because he knew every little detail of this inconsistent track that not a lot of people really like to play. I can only imagine how satisfied he was with a half-second lead and just left it there. This record also happened just before the release of Mario Kart 8, but probably more significantly, the WFC shutdown. I can't say this with certainty, but I think the general impression was when that happened, contact was lost with a lot of Japanese players believing this was the end of Mario Kart Wii, since online play was gone, and the WFC leaderboards were gone as well. I don't really know how much they knew about Weemfi or Mashal's Ghost database at that time, but regardless, we didn't see Infi for a long time. But in June 2017, he shocked all of us by single-handedly overhauling the meta for Coconut Mall no shortcut, but he seemingly left Dry Dry Ruins alone. While this record stood, another 147 wasn't seen for nearly 2.5 years. Fox got a 147.978 in October 2016, and Jas became the frontrunner to beat Infi with a 147.642 in June 2017, but no one tried hard enough to beat Infi. It was in April 2018 when Infi himself made his return, improving to a 147.457. On Moonview Highway, Liam's 143.316 from March 2016 is the longest standing at 965 days. This was another surprise to me, because looking at the history, I had no idea why this lasted as long as it did. There were multiple people with .3 times. Silver, Fox, and Totem all had the record here previously with .3s, and Zeke also had a .3 when Liam got his 316. So why did no one beat this? Well, when Liam said this, Totem quit the game, Silver quit the game, Fox didn't have interest in playing Moonview Highway, and Zeke may have been focused on Bowser's Castle no shortcut. As for the run itself, there's no big strategy change. It did, however, start approaching the truck pace lock on lap 3, in the sense that you couldn't go much faster if you wanted to just wheelie straight through. After this record, people had to start drifting around it, and judging the cycle and pace can be pretty difficult to determine. Figuring this out meant lots of trial and error, and failing to the truck many times. That challenge comes at a ton of different paces, including the truck on the last turn lap 3 on a high 144 pace. As a result, the top 10 here was very tight, with 10th worldwide being a 143.5. In addition to this, the newer 021 shroom strat was a sticking point for many players in 2016. Compared to 012, it required very different drive-in, and people didn't adjust easily to it. They assumed that an epic run was needed to beat out this red car here, before the bridge lap 3. And speaking of which, the bridge lap 3 is also deceptively challenging, and by the way, you're going to see the truck coming up here. But anyway, lap 3 continues to be one of the hardest laps in the game to execute for those reasons. As for why nothing else lasted this long, there were many different shroom strat and vehicle changes over time, and by this point, Flame Runner was here to stay. Liam's record lasted until Luke beat it with a 143.304 in October 2018, and would eventually figure out how to get around the truck. Looking at Bowser Castle Glitch's history, Jared's 209.074 from June 2020 has the longest duration. It lasted 683 days, which is also a bit lower on the duration spectrum compared to other categories. This does edge out a couple other 600-plus day durations from Axel in 2012 and Fox in 2016, so the world record history has been pretty balanced throughout the years. It's also odd because 208 was right there for the taking. This run even has a big mistake at the end of lap 2, and caused Jared to use a shroom to make up for it. You'll see that a little later. I know if it were me, I would have wanted to rectify that as soon as possible. And in all fairness, that's probably how Jared felt too. So why did this last? Well, for one thing, Blaze had mostly stepped away from the game by this point. He did try to get the record back, but he was already losing interest. Other than that, I think there were only 2 other 209s on the top 10. Both of them were .9s. No one else had the experience on Bowser's Castle Glitch that Jared did. Jared said he was going to take a break for a few weeks after setting this, so maybe he did play again then, but didn't register any improvements. He did upload some laps and paces while this stood, but still nothing for a while. The run itself doesn't have any new strats that shifted the meta. But despite the error going into lap 3, Bowser's Castle glitch was at a strange crossroads. Flame Runner is definitely faster from being able to drive the course faster, but the glitch is multiple magnitudes harder than the Mach Bike without a shroom, even with the hop glitch method. And here you're going to see that Jared misses the wheelie after going off that little geyser bump and had to use a shroom to get back to top speed. Not sure how much that lost, but I would think at least it cost a 208. This is why the record in general stayed with Mach Bike though, since 2012. You can also get extremely fast and low hop glitches with Mach Bike that you can't get with the Flame Runner, making Mach Bike more manageable, but also clunky to drive. All the time save with Flame Runner is just from the drive-in, but it was too difficult to set a record with it. With all this in mind, any other Daisy players would just go for a 209 and call it a day. But this was eventually improved by Jared himself in 2022 with a 209.010. Thankfully for him, he did get the 208 at a later date. Over to Bowser's Castle No Shortcut, we go back several years to early 2013 when Wada S got a 221.320. Now this category has a really messy and complicated history. Enmead explains it very well in his video about Zeke's 220.672, but I'll give a brief summary here. Wada S's time used to be a pending time. In 2013, we heard of this time existing, but we had no proof. No video proof, no ghost data, nothing. And the time was so amazing that it just didn't seem real. There was also a lot of paranoia in the community following the events of 2012, where multiple top players were caught cheating. For these reasons, we couldn't realistically count this as a world record. Finally, in May 2014, a Japanese player uploaded this video to YouTube of the time, and we were amazed to see that it truly did exist. So for over a year, we operated as if Suryu and Nagisa had the record in the mid-221 range. Those were wiped away after learning that Wada S's time did exist. His time was finally counted on the world record site and suddenly had a 400+ day duration. This time was then supposedly beaten by Nagisa with a 221.313, capping Wada S's duration at 586 days. Then, Suryu and Zeke traded the record back and forth. However, Suryu was setting increasingly suspicious records, allegedly setting a 220.475, which we never counted, and is still a pending record to this day. In 2019, Nagisa was found to have used rapid fire in his records, so all of his records were discounted. After being removed on the Bowser's Castle No Shortcut side, Wada S's duration inflated to 828 days. Meanwhile, the community was still trying to figure out what to do about Suryu, because more recent records were being uploaded to Nagisa's channel, so those two players were very closely linked. By July 2020, Suryu's world records post-WFC shutdown were moved to pending, bringing Wada S's final duration to 1,298 days. It's a shame when this happens, because not only was Wada S's time barely recognized as the record when it stood, but the whole competitive landscape would have been different without these times that weren't supposed to count in the first place. The bottom line is, as good as Wada S's time was for 2013, I don't think it would have lasted this long had there been a normal history. Officially, Zeke was the one to beat this with a 221.220, which was recognized as world record all along. Alright, having gotten that history lesson out of the way, we move to Rainbow Road Glitch, where Logan's 210.051 lasted the longest at 478 days. This was using the method with the Quacker, where you had to line up, hit the boost panel, land inside the fence, spin drift at the right time, land inside the fence again while going back far enough to be inside key checkpoint 0, and hoping you get a big enough bounce off the road to send you all the way to the other side and finishing the lap for a lap count. Like a few other categories, this has a pretty short history, starting with Arthur getting the first glitch run in January 2021. Logan's record here was set on October 2021, improving over his previous record, and one could argue that this wasn't even supposed to exist. He got this during a random session of messing around after not even playing it for months, and he got this run in 3 tries. For as difficult of a glitch as this is with Quacker, fluking it the way he did was unbelievable. I think he wanted to sub 210 here, and he had a few sessions in setting it, but he never really tried hard enough to get it. He wasn't able to get that lucky again, that's for sure. At this stage of the game, not many people were willing to try Rainbow Road Glitch. Before the outward drifting bike revolution came about, only 5 people had a glitch run here. Arthur, Logan, Core, Lawrence, and Jeremy, who is the closest behind at a 213.720, and that was all over the span of 2 years, and Logan was still leading by 3 seconds. Hunter was the first to set a world record with the outward drifting bike method in February 2023, beating Logan with a 207.166. I feel like any of the 2 out of 3 glitch runs could have been poised to last longer than this, but the difficulty of the outward drifting bike method was so much lower than the Quacker method, granted it's still pretty difficult, that more people were managing 2 out of 3 runs than people did with one Quacker glitch a couple years back. So that's why I believe that this 210 here lasted the longest so far, because of the difference in difficulty and wider accessibility to more players. Now that there's a 3 out of 3 glitch run, we'll just have to see what happens next. Will there be more? Or will Owen Smith's record just last forever? On Rainbow Road No Shortcut, Kaede's 224.994 has lasted the longest. It's from February 2016 and lasted 1,065 days. This is arguably one of the most unique categories in the entire game, for the sole reason that it's the only one that uses a cart. The first 224 here was a huge milestone for Rainbow Road, and it was really easy for the community to rally behind Kaede's achievement. I don't even think a 223 is in the cards for this track, unless big strides are made with Flame Runner or maybe Shooting Star. Seems unlikely, but crazier things have happened. For about a month beforehand, Rainbow Road was a battle between Kaede and Ando, and Kaede won the race to the 224, 6 days after Ando hit a 225.086. It's very common for players to sub a second barrier and be satisfied no matter what, and I think that's what Kaede did here. But of course, he had a lot of reasons to pop a beer for this one. This run had a big lap 3 best known split of 48.209, which was an insane lap to hit in 2016. Ando continued playing for a couple months after Kaede subbed, but then he lost motivation. The next closest was Flare, with a 225.3, which was still a bit of a gap, and he was also inactive at this time. This left Kaede all alone at the top with his 224. It's also worth mentioning that when this category switched over to Flameflyer, that deterred a lot of the community from playing it because many people were unwilling to learn karts, so there were fewer contenders overall. But there was always a karting community for Mario Kart Wii, and this was their opportunity to shine in a bike-dominated game, so the Switch also brought in some new contenders as well. This was also set during a more dead period of the game. The community was still picking itself back up after Mario Kart 8's release, so fewer records were being set overall. I think we can also attribute this record lasting so long to the vehicle progression that did happen in years past. Flameflyer was solidified as the meta at this point, and this was definitely the best Flameflyer world record Rainbow Road had seen. There also really aren't any more strats that could be implemented. Flare's current record uses all the same strats as Kaede's first 224 here, so even back in 2016, Rainbow Road became a test of total optimization. About a year and a half later, people like Bob and Elsan started making moves, but still had ground to make up. It wasn't until January 2019 when Bob pulled through and beat Kaede with a 224.958. Moving to the retros now, we start them off with GCN Peach Bitch, where Breakson set a 1 minute .395 on the glitch category in June 2017, lasting 1,060 days. This has always been a very underplayed category, especially when this track hit the 1 minute range. Breakson was a seasoned glitch player by this point, so it's no surprise that he was able to get his hands on Peach Beach for some length of time. He actually got this run during a 10 to 15 minute break from playing other tracks, and then he just never played it again. There was some competition though. David and Blaze both set some good lap 1s, but couldn't get a second glitch. They might have been able to sub 1 minute otherwise. Getting 2 tree clips in the same run is deceptively difficult. The clip never happens the same way every time, and even if you do get it twice, you need to be able to get those lucky glitches that crash into the pink sign like this to compete with world record. Due to the difficulty, the category went underplayed, and Breakson just kept the record for nearly 3 years. He initially took this record from Arrow, but Arrow took it back in May 2020 with a 1 minute .049. On Peach Beach No Shortcut, we come back to Liam. His 112.891 from September 2013 is the longest lasting at 1,742 days. That's the 5th longest of all time. Liam was definitely way ahead of his time here, and I think this is one of the few tracks that really approached their fullest potential early on. Ever since this run, the world record has only been improved by 235 milliseconds, so that just goes to show how optimized this already was. In 2012, Cole had a big lead with his 112.992, and he had a bit of an aura of invincibility around him, which probably deterred much of the player base from playing this. Liam and Hooktail were the two likely candidates to challenge him, and it was Liam who broke through and acquired a lead of his own. Other than Hooktail, everyone else was stuck in the 113.2 to 0.3 range. This was Liam's second .8, and it only improved 4 milliseconds over his previous record, so he definitely wanted more. He kept playing through April 2014, but when other tracks piqued his interest, Peach Beach was cast to the side. For the longest time, Cole and Liam were still the only 112s. There wasn't even a third 112 until Guy got a 112.986 in May 2017. That's nearly 4 years later. No one was at Liam's level for the longest time, but Guy kept pushing and took down Liam's time with a 112.846. And speaking of Cole, we have him once again on DS Yoshi Falls. His 58.970 from March 2013 lasted 1,680 days, right after Omega's 59 flat became the first record to reach 1,000 days, which means the world record here was only within a 30 millisecond range for over 7 years. Omega just vanished after the 59 flat. We still don't really know why, there have been rumors. But having just talked about Aura before, Omega definitely had it here, and it seemed invincible. But Cole was the one to step up using the mini-turbo strat into laps 2 and 3, which I think saves more than 30 milliseconds across 3 laps, but it's the end time that matters. He was very happy with the 58 and intended to never time trial again, but we know that didn't happen. Omega was gone, and everyone else was too far off. JJ was second worldwide with a 59.168 before Cole set this, but he quit pretty soon after setting it. It seems like anyone else who got close just gave up because the track had so much randomness, and Omega put up a huge mental block for years. Like Liam's Peach Beach, Cole's record fell to a new generation of time trialers, starting with Blaze, who set a 58.955 in October 2017. On SNES Ghost Valley 2, the longest duration of the glitch category belongs to Leaf, with his 51.319 from June 2015. It lasted 1,353 days, and this blew our minds for 2 reasons. Obviously, one of those reasons is he did the glitch 2 out of 3. The second reason is, as amazing as the 2 glitches were, he followed them up with a 17.7 lap 3. While that lap's slower than several of the former glitch records, everyone was so amazed at how he held it together after the second glitch, and I was one of those people too. His nerves had to have been through the roof after that second glitch. It's pretty clear why this stood so long. Leaf was definitely satisfied with this, and Ghost Valley 2 glitch has been underplayed for years, especially when this run happened. No one wanted to go for 2 out of 3, and they would have struggled to beat this. But Leaf surprised us all by improving it to a 50.862 in 2019, and he remained the only 2 out of 3 run on Worldwide Tops until the task glitch was implemented in 2020. Moving over to the no shortcut category, Sosis has the longest duration with its 52.746 from October 2022, lasting 879 days. Blaze set some really strong records here previously, having gotten the first 52.7 in September 2018, so it was really impressive when Sosis took this track over from him in 2021. And with Blaze away from the game, Sosis was the best at driving Ghost Valley 2. I think this run came to be when Justin set a 52.791 in September 2022, using a slip drift method on the third mini-turbo of lap 3, which saves about 40 milliseconds. Having seen this, Sosis went and played defense. Once he increased his lead, I think that deterred everyone else from playing, which probably factors into why this lasted so long, because he's just going to come back anyway. As optimized as this track has become, Justin's slip strat shows that there's more to go, and it was the biggest threat to Sosis. In March 2025, Barney beat Sosis with a 52.729 using the slip drift strat, With it finally being implemented, we might see a lot more out of this track soon enough. On N64 Mario Raceway, we have Zane, who's been the Raceway King for most of Mario Kart Wii's history. His 141.636 lasted 1,319 days, starting in December 2013. This one stumped me initially, but then I realized his previous record of 141.671 lasted over a year after beating Cooney's 678. Zane poured more hours into Mario Raceway than anyone else, and Cooney had a ton of potential as well. Cooney was the only other person apart from Zane who really understood the track. Most of the community remembers him for uploading a 33.7 lap 2 he hit with Rosalina. Looking back, it's actually surprising he didn't accomplish more. But based on Zane's records lasting a long time after Cooney, it can safely be assumed that Cooney stopped playing, leaving Zane all by himself at the top. No one else was even below a 141.9, and worldwide tops were still at a 142.2 or .3. The skill gap here may have been for a couple reasons. The slip drift strat at the Shroom was introduced when Mario Raceway hit a 141, and it was still a bit foreign to most players and weren't experienced with it. Also, Mario Raceway admittedly isn't the most interesting track that people like to play, as it's not the most technical or flashy. Once in a while, Zane would return here just to try and widen the gap between him and Cooney, and that's what he accomplished with this run. He was satisfied with the improvement, but knew it wasn't close to his potential, since his best splits gave him a 141.3. Despite this, he didn't play Mario Raceway much afterwards, as he didn't feel threatened. The community saw 141.6 here as a really strong time that was pushing the limits. With all this considered, it makes a little more sense why this lasted. Even in 2017, no one else had improved below a 141.8. Zane's time lasted until August 2017, when Naki shocked the world with a 141.628 using Daisy Mockbike. Headed to N64 Sherbet Land glitch, the longest record here is a 116.907 by Arthur, set on August 13th, 2020. This lasted 603 days and was set during the Magic Cruiser 2 out of 3 days. Thinking about why this ended up as the longest duration, this category had a pretty steady evolution as well, so record improvements weren't massively spaced out. Nothing went the distance during the 1 out of 3 spear days, because Guy was continuously pushing the limits of 1 out of 3 spear over the span of 2 years, and his 143.133 got cut short by the 95% roll evolution in 2019. This made landing back on the track and getting lap counts much easier. This then allowed people to eventually get the glitch 2 out of 3 times, led by Taylor's 129.601 with Spear. Spear was definitely easier to get high clips with, but eventually the record switched over to Magic Cruiser, which was much more difficult. By the time this category went down to a 117, and eventually Arthur's time, everyone had decided that this was a horrible glitch category to play. Even though there were still seconds of improvement left on the table, it was just too difficult. Eventually, in 2022, Mitch would be the one to beat this with a 116.094, and later that year, Jack set a 112.225, which would probably still be standing today, but the 3 out of 3 revolution cut his duration 2 days short of Arthur's. Now without clipping the poll, Sosis' 203.750 from July 2019 lasted 1,791 days. Last year, this became the second longest lasting world record in Mario Kart Wii history. Sherbetland has had some long-standing records, and I think the track has just gotten more unpopular as time went on. And I don't know if others share this opinion, but generally speaking, I don't like Sherbetland as a track. I've never enjoyed the icy physics, and it made for one of the least fun tracks to play in the entire game. But maybe that's just me. If others share the same opinion about Sherbetland that I do, that would explain some of the inactivity. This track also has the most chains out of any time trial. I believe there's 15 of them. It depends on how much you want to count the one right before the line lap 3. There's also the first and last corners of each lap that you have to TF input over in order to cut off as much of the corner as possible without falling off. You also have to hope that you don't bounce all over the place when taking those corners, causing a ton of variance from lap to lap. Anyway, why did this record last so long? This is yet another case of Sosis being on his own island. He was all alone with his 203, and a pretty deep one at that. He had no reason to keep going. Liam was second worldwide with a 204.1 at the time. Fast forward 3 years later, he was still second worldwide with a .1, but in the following years, players slowly started catching up. Felix had the second 203 in July 2023, which is 4 years after Sosas' time, but hadn't improved since. But Jap moved into second worldwide in May 2024 with a 203.910, and I believe that was the catalyst that had Sosas play in Sherbetland again. As I've said previously, Sosas has historically been perfectly content letting some records sit unless he needs to defend, and he was able to do that no problem here. This resulted in him improving his own record with a 1 millisecond improvement. In hindsight, this run probably wasn't as strong as the community thought. It probably just seemed super strong because he had a massive lead, and now he's solidified his island even more with his 203.576. That one could honestly last a long time as well. In one of the newest categories of Mario Kart Wii, Vincent N's 114.513 on GBA Shy Guy Beach glitch from May 2022 lasted a very respectable 743 days. This was set less than 3 weeks after the Zip Zip glitch was first implemented into world records by Arvo, and I think that's important to note regarding why this record lasted so long. Vincent established the driving standard so quickly after its implementation, and he did the glitch on lap 3. For the first few weeks, the world record was completely up for grabs, and this record dashed everyone's hopes of snagging it briefly. You can certainly argue that it stopped being a free-for-all when Luke did lap 3 glitch. His was the first record to last more than 2 days. But Vincent didn't let up. He had Zip Zip driving down quickly, and the moment he got the lap 3 clip, it was game over. He broke the record by over a second, and to use Vincent's words, he was completely satisfied with this run, and he didn't touch it at all while it stood. The community saw this record as unbeatable, but in hindsight, its strength was definitely overestimated. Different driving techniques were later realized, and the glitch itself could have been taken more aggressively. Ray would be the one to beat Vincent in May 2024 with a 114.486. Vincent knew Ray was coming up, but wanted to wait until he was beaten. And now, he has a 113 that looks just as unbeatable. However much we're overrating the strength, we'll just have to see. Now, before I start talking about this run, I do want to give a shout out to Sosas, because his 121.496 on GBA Shy Guy Beach lasted only 3 days short of the one being shown here. I would have loved to talk about that run, so I wanted to make sure it didn't get discredited at all, because that was an insane time that really shocked the community, including Sosas himself. But the record shown here ended up being the longest at 1,106 days, and it's a 121.924, the first 121. This is an old one from May 2011. This happened not too long after Spear took over on Shy Guy Beach for good. Mick had the record with Spear briefly in early 2010 with a 122.608, but then it quickly reverted back to Magic Cruiser because not enough people were on board yet. The world wasn't ready for Shy Guy Beach Spear. It was much later that year that Rom initiated the switch once and for all. This player here, being a Spear specialist, understandably hopped on this track and was able to bring Rom's time down by over 0.2, which resulted in quite a big sub. Once again, I'd say this is another case of someone getting a sub, being satisfied with it. There was also a big gap between first and second. I think the top 10 became spaced out at the time because Spear was not as consistent as Magic Cruiser, and players preferred the consistency of Magic Cruiser. Even 2 years later, no one else even got a 121. Instead, there was a tie for second between Totem and Vayu at 122.097. But finally, in 2014, Fox was the one to beat this time with a 121.904. Now moving back towards the present, Luke's current DS Delfino Square world record is the longest lasting at over 1,200 days. His 203.525 has been standing since December 2021, and it's easy to see why. Luke had a very strong record in his 204.208, but as time goes on, the game progresses. Logan introduced the dock shortcut into the world record with a 204.086, and I give Luke a lot of credit for adapting to the dock shortcut himself, especially with Wii Remote and Nunchuck. I can barely fathom doing runs with the dock shortcut, trying not to accidentally trick. It's stupidly hard and QM reliant to save time with anyway, without having to worry about accidentally registering a trick. But Luke answered back quickly, and got a really solid 2 out of 3 dock run. It's not a perfect run, it has some big time losses on lap 2, and lap 3 was decent at best, but it can't be underscored how difficult it is to drive the track after getting the dock shortcut even once, and even today, Luke is still the best at driving the track. When this was set, Luke was doing a month-long grind of Delfino Square, and having said it early in the month, the community thought it would get beaten pretty quickly, but here it is today, still standing. To this day, aside from Luke and Logan, I think there's only one other time on Worldwide Tops that uses the dock at all, and it's ranked 10th worldwide. This is a shortcut that is really only worth going for if your driving is that of a 204.5 or lower. If it isn't, you can pretty much forget it. For all these reasons, no one wants to play Delfino Square with the dock shortcut. The way I see it, it's all up to Luke to decide whether he wants to play it again, but he really doesn't need to. He's attempted this a few times since his world record, but every time he played it, the dock shortcut made him realize why no one has challenged him. Maybe Logan could contend again, but I don't believe he has any plans to. I'm sure one day we might see a 3 out of 3 dock shortcut run, maybe approaching a 202, but I don't see that happening soon. I think we're gonna see this record last a lot longer. On to GCN Waluigi Stadium glitch, and I don't know if I even need to say what it is. It's Hunter's 131.987. It's over 1100 days old. Rather than rambling on about the difficulty of 2 out of 3 glitches, I'll instead present an analogy that Hunter gave me regarding his consistency. And keep in mind, his is far above anyone else's. Thoroughly shuffle a standard 52 card deck of playing cards, then flip a coin. If it's heads, continue. If it's tails, start over. Assuming heads, draw a random card from your deck. If it's the ace of spades, continue. Anything else, start from the beginning. Flip your coin again. If it's heads, congratulations, you completed your first glitch. Repeat this entire process knowing if just one of these goes wrong, you must start over completely. Since you can respawn, you may replace the final coin with a 6-sided die, where 1 through 4 means you complete the second glitch, and 5 or 6 means you fail it. For all the math nerds out there, this comes out to approximately a 1 in 32,448 chance of getting 2 glitches in the same run, without factoring in time between attempts. You cannot fluke this, you have to know what you're doing. I think this should give a good enough understanding of why 2 out of 3 is so dang hard, even if you have the best consistency out of anyone. Hunter has no plans to improve himself, so someone else will have to do it. And there might be a couple people today just crazy enough to try. Danny Boy has expressed interest in wanting a 2 out of 3, and Core has made some attempts as well. He even had a run that bypassed on lap 3, but didn't get the frame perfect hop, and the lap wouldn't have counted anyway. There's simply too many moving parts. With all this said, I believe this will either get beaten much sooner than we think, or this will last another 1,000 days. The community definitely sees this as one of the strongest records of all time. Pivoting to the no shortcut side, Totem's 148.861, set in July 2013, lasted 1,787 days. Totem has held GCN Waluigi Stadium for most of the game's history, and this time is currently the 3rd longest lasting world record of all time. Totem was so far ahead of the curve here for a long time, holding a world record here on and off since mid-2009. The turn skip got implemented in June 2011, and that's when Totem really started taking this track to an unbelievable standard. After Totem's first sub of 148.979, he was pushed to improve to this time when Mariyoshi set a 149.219, and there might have been one other 149 on the top 10. Everyone else on Worldwide Tops was bottlenecked in the low 150 range, so Totem really sat all alone. Lap 1 in this run was considerably weaker compared to previous world records, but this lap 2 and 3 were incredible. Throughout 2013 to 2014, there were plenty of Japanese players who had gotten their own 149s. Mariyoshi was still the closest, but no one could keep up with Totem. I think they mainly just got their own 149s and called it quits. As mentioned a few times before, Totem quit the game in mid-2015, so he wasn't going to improve this at all. And even for 3 years after he quit, no one could touch him. This survived the dead periods when Mario Kart 8 came out, and there was generally less activity for a couple years. It took a newer generation of players to step up, and that's what Ace did. He beat Totem's long-standing record at last with a 148.808 in June 2018. And as I recall, Totem's run here just got knocked off of worldwide tops after over 11 years, so even today, only a handful of players have beaten him since then. This is yet another illustration of how far ahead of his time he was. Moving right along to DS Desert Hills, on the glitch side, we have Fox with his 132.686. He got the first solid 3 out of 3 glitch run in 2015, and it lasted 867 days through 2018. Thomas was the first to implement the glitch into world records in 2014, leading the charge down to a 133. After Troy got a 3 out of 3 here, Fox swooped in and beat it with a 2 out of 3, before quickly putting together a solid 3 out of 3 run, leading second worldwide by over a second. What needs to be understood about Fox as a player is that whenever something in this game caught his interest, he almost always got world record there. His skill was magnitudes above everyone else, and it wasn't close. So when he got this time, it was extremely demotivating for everyone else who was competing. This was the first 3 out of 3 Fox was satisfied with, so he didn't bother playing again. And he really only played it in the first place because he found it fun for a time. Before Fox came in, there were a number of players going for glitch times like Guy, Leaf, Hunter, and Silver, but Fox left them all feeling defeated. There used to be a reasonable shot of world record with 2 out of 3, but then 3 out of 3 suddenly became a requirement, and the Fire Snake certainly didn't help on lap 3 either, so no one made a play to overcome the deficit. Looking back, the record was definitely a lot more beatable than people thought, but it took a long time for people to catch up to Fox's skill level. For these reasons, Fox's record stood longer than everyone else. Justin had a long-lasting record with his 130.990, but he improved it himself with newer glitch strategies. Blaze was the only player in this time frame of Fox's record who made the serious push and eventually beat him with a 132.451. On No Shortcut, we have Sosis once again with his 134.397. It lasted 1,108 days between 2020 and 2023. This run was huge when it was set, and the community saw this as a very strong time. It completely skipped over point 4, beating Paul's 134.520, and Paul's run completely skipped over point 6 when that was set. Both runs got lucky cuts on laps 1 and 2, but Sosis' pace until lap 3 was nuts, almost as good as the current best-known pace. Lap 3 was clearly the weak spot in his run, but he obviously didn't need another lucky cut to get a mind-blowing time. He just had to finish the run. I'm not sure where Paul was when this was set, but he hasn't improved this time since then, and everyone else was at a .7 at best. In fact, Paul stayed a second worldwide for nearly the entire time Sosis held this record. Gustav had a shot at beating Sosis later down the line, but he got bottled up at a 134.6. Desert Hills No Shortcut is a relatively underplayed category, and it gets extremely challenging and frustrating once you get to a 134.7, because then lucky cuts become necessary. Because of this, nearly everyone stops playing after their first 134, or slightly after. As a result, Sosis didn't have competition, and similar to other tracks Sosis has played, once he gets a satisfactory time, he just let it stand. So that's why this one lasted longer than all the others. In 2023, it was Breakson who surprised us all with his rapid progression here, beating Sosis with a 134.381, and once again, Sosis got the record back as quickly as he lost it. We now head to GBA Bowser Castle 3 for one of the biggest records the game has seen in recent years. Logan's current world record of 155.715 from July 2022 is quickly approaching 1,000 days. We've heard of the No Stop Shroomless Ultra at least since December 2010, when Choi uploaded a 39.096 lap 1 with it, using Daisy and Mach-Bike. However, it was always deemed way too difficult to implement in runs. In fact, it wasn't implemented into world records until nearly 10 years later, in 2020, when Breakson achieved a 157.474 with 1 out of 3. And now Logan's record here does it on all 3 laps. It doesn't surprise me that this has lasted so long, and quite frankly, it shouldn't surprise anyone else either. This is pretty much the same case as Mario Circuit No Shortcut, where a strat that was known for years but is immensely challenging gets implemented on all 3 laps, creating a massive lead from the rest of the competition. I remember watching this run on Twitch in disbelief when I saw him get the cut on lap 3, and Logan was already hyped going down the lap 3 straight. Skipping 156 entirely is nothing short of mind-blowing. It wasn't a sloppy 3 out of 3 run either. Logan also established a strong driving standard for anyone who dared to try 3 for 3 themselves. When Logan got this time, he had a 1.3 second lead over second worldwide, and it stayed that way for a long time because no one else wanted to go for 3 out of 3 no-stop shroomless ultras. It was one of those strats that only Logan was crazy enough to attempt and succeed at. The lead would finally get cut down some starting in March 2024, when Noah started making some attempts at it. He's had quite a few improvements with 3 out of 3, but none of them beat Logan, which shows that while Logan's time can still be improved, getting 3 out of 3 does not guarantee world record by any means. His lead is now down to 0.2, so chances are this could get beaten sooner than we think. Since setting this time, Logan has never tried to improve, and has no plans to improve, so Noah's really the only candidate. I don't know of anyone else who's going to try this anyway. We go back a few years to June 2017 for the No Shortcut category, when Havoc set a 216.684, which lasted 1,125 days. Bowser Castle 3 is a very popular track both online and offline, but mostly for the shortcuts. Like Grumble Volcano, the No Shortcut category wasn't always recognized as an official world record category, at least not until the players page defined the rules in 2011. When Havoc was initially going for the record here, there was actually some competition for it. Ollie was actively going for it at the same time when record was in the lower 217 range, but by the time Havoc got the first 216, activity died down a bit. When Havoc got this time, it was an immediate jump from a 0.8, and I think it took the community by surprise when it happened. This track is tough because chains on the last straight are extremely important, and you also need good lows, which are QM reliant. On a track that mostly appears to be fully determined by lines, these two aspects provide a lot of unwanted variance to the track, so he hit it big with this 0.6. From what I've gathered, Havoc got this time in an hour of playing, just after taking a break when he got a 216.8. His goal was a 0.7, so he had some unfinished business, and within that 1 hour, he achieved and pushed it far beyond what he was expecting. All that considered, Havoc was very content with this. The community saw this as a very strong time, especially with only one other 216 on the top 10, and that player stopped playing after getting a 216. The next closest was Jack's former record of 217.274, so it was truly Havoc all alone at the top. He didn't need to play this anymore, and didn't play it at all when it stood. He had a potential end goal in mind of 216.5 or 0.4, but other aspects of his life took over, and he never improved again. Usually a good measure of how strong a record was for its time is whether or not it reached 1,000 days. People tend to have more respect for a time when that happens, and it certainly was evident with Havoc. His time was eventually beaten with a 216.653 in 2020, and funnily enough, Havoc was the one to convince that player to try and beat him. If it weren't for that conversation, this likely would have lasted until Luke and Logan made their own pushes. And by the way, Havoc's time is still 6th worldwide today, solidifying its legacy in Mario Kart Wii history. On N64 DK's Jungle Parkway, Breakson's 45.280 from 2017 lasted 1,236 days. Breakson was the first player to perfect the glitch, which held on to the title of being the hardest glitch in 2015 and 2016. So when he worked this down to a 45 with 3 out of 3, the community's reaction was a mixture of, this is absolutely insane, no one's going to beat this, and maybe there's a method to the madness. Despite that, though, it was still a glitch that very few people tried to get even once. David came the closest in 2017 with a 47.5, but didn't continue after that. To give you an idea of how the community viewed this glitch, when I got the first 2 out of 3 record here, everyone thought it was going to last 1,000 days. I ended up improving it the following week. And then they said, okay, this one will last 1,000 days. And I didn't believe them, and I was right not to, because it only lasted 6 months. I think what helped Braixen's time become more accessible was Benny's alignment strat against Hunter's alignment ghost. As difficult as the glitch still is today, when one player can improve their 3 out of 3 time several times over the course of a couple months like Braixen did, that tends to be an indication that it's not all luck-based, but there is a definite technique behind it. It takes a special kind of player to be able to do that and unpiece every aspect of the glitch. So even though the record was theoretically very improvable, competition ran very dry with 3 out of 3. Braixen did try to improve this for 6 months after setting it, but got distracted by Yoshi Falls and never played it again. This record lasted until June 2020, when Invincible improved this to a 44.754. He did have a long-lasting record in his 41.072, but he ended up improving it himself before he could rack up any more days. Now that it's at a 38, this category is genuinely hard to improve, whether you're good at the glitch or not. On the no shortcut category, the first 211 by Yasha on New Year's Day 2014 shocked everyone. His 211.885 lasted 1,218 days. Like Coconut Mall, DK's Jungle Parkway is a track that Yasha had world records on dating back to 2008, and even several years later, he was setting insane records like this one. The time was nearly a 0.4 second improvement over Aruba's former record. Aruba had beaten Yasha's 212.291 by a couple frames, and then Yasha dropped this time very soon after. The DK's Jungle Parkway Shroom Spot is known for being notoriously inconsistent, and I think it's a part of why this has been an underplayed track for years. Even top players dreaded playing this. Aruba wasn't actively playing in 2014, and Vayu seemed to have quit the game by this point. He had a 212.5. Everyone else was bottled up in the higher 212s. Yasha's record seemed destined to last for years if he didn't play again. The only one to make a push through the ranks during this time was Thomas. He had achieved the world record on the shortcut category in April 2014, before the Ultra was discovered, but didn't play again until 2015. Switching to no shortcut, Thomas made many improvements, eventually getting a 211.950 in late 2015. Having finally broken up the top 3 of Yasha, Aruba, and Vayu, he was the clear frontrunner to take down Yasha, but Yasha's record set up a huge mental block. While Thomas never truly gave up, it was difficult to push through. Finally, though, he tied Yasha's record here, which motivated Yasha to play this again. Up until then, he really didn't need to play again. 8 days later, Yasha broke the tie with a 211.707. Nothing set after this record was really able to last as long, because Yasha made a couple more improvements down to a 211.455, cementing yet another lead for him over everyone else. And then after that, he seemingly left the game. Then Luke came onto the scene, and then the new Shroom Strat by Justin introduced in October 2022 came around that brought more activity to the track, even if the new method still had a lot of jank to it. We now head to the newest world record category in Mario Kart Wii, only spanning back to February 2023. This is also the most recent record out of all the records I'm showing here. For GCN Mario Circuit Shortcut, Logan's current world record of 129.945 has been standing for over 500 days since the following September. Logan is the only one who knows how to do the shortcut in a practical manner. He is the only one who has even bothered to do this, and he is only one of a few people with the driving skill required to outpace the no shortcut record and set something substantial. Logan doesn't need to improve this, and I don't see anyone beating this under the current circumstances. You have no time to stop in a line because any more than half a second of hesitation and you don't save a thing. There's maybe 2 other people who could theoretically contend with this. Big Fork and Luke are probably the only people who have the driving skill on GCN Mario Circuit to do the shortcut and be able to get close to this time. Big Fork never made the shortcut, and I don't think Luke would ever try this just based on the type of player he is. Now the caveat to everything I just said is theoretically, this time can be beaten no shortcut. The best known splits at the moment total a 129.707. Will it happen though? It's really hard to see it happen because GCN Mario Circuit is such an inconsistent track between the perfect double trick at the end and the double mounds just before. It would need to be a heck of a run to beat this one. But if no shortcut begins approaching this, I can see Logan trying to push this further so it's out of reach. But as it stands now, I have to believe this will last at least a few more years. Going back several years to March 2015, Fox's 130.798 on the no shortcut category was set, and it lasted 1,416 days. I distinctly remember this happening. I was in a Skype chat with a bunch of Mario Kart Wii time trialers, and I remember Fox dropping this time in the chat and being very, very hyped over it, and we were all hyped for him as well. He played for 6 hours that day, took a break, and a few minutes after that, got this time. To see Fox jump from a .9 straight to a .7 was jaw-dropping. For 2015, and even for today, because it's still 4th worldwide right now, this was Fox's most insane record ever, and Fox himself says this was one of his favorite things he has done in Mario Kart Wii. What made this run special was people always talked about the fabled 9 for 9 run. A good shortcut, the chain wheelie, and a good double trick on all 3 laps. This run misses the chain wheelie on lap 3, but everything else went right. When this was set, it was Fox's time, Demon's 130.965, and then a bunch of .3s and .4s filled the rest of the top 10. There was a very large skill gap here, and Demon had no motivation after Fox got this time, and Fox was super happy with this time and had no reason to improve. Fox and Demon had the only 130s unimproved for over 3 years. Liam would finally be the third 130 in October 2018. He worked it down to a .8, but didn't improve it since then. The next 130 belonged to Luke, and in February 2019, Luke pulled through and beat Fox by 1 millisecond. On SNES Mario Circuit 3, the longest lasting record belongs to Tyler. For 1,179 days, his 118.107 stood from November 2013 to February 2017. This was the final world record to be set with double MT, and it holds up extremely well. Maybe only a dozen people have beaten this since. In 2013, people were still questioning whether Mario Circuit 3 would see a 117 one day. This time also beat one of MK Dasher's old TASs of 118.116, which made this a huge milestone. Luigi was second worldwide with his former 118.170 world record, and he did improve this by 1 millisecond in 2014, but nothing since then. The rest of the top 10 was all .2 and .3, which was quite far off for Mario Circuit 3 standards. Tyler's time is one that has gained more respect as time went on. It's one that Luke respects to this day because of how strong it is with double MT. In addition to no one being close, this kept standing through the dead periods of 2014 because nearly everyone on top stopped playing. No new contenders came around after, not even Fox in his prime. Finally, in 2017, Luke played regular tracks and went for Mario Circuit 3, which he knew was probably the strongest record in the game by this point. He got his first world record by tying Tyler's time, but right after, he broke the tie with a 118.097, both runs using triple mini turbo, which really marked a new era for this track. Over to DS Peach Gardens, which has a very unique history. King Alex's 158.986 lasted 813 days, starting in November 2020. Speaking of its history, Peach Gardens has progressed from Spear Manual to Spear Automatic getting the first sub 2-minute time, back to Spear Manual, then back to Spear Automatic, and currently we have Flame Runner Manual. When Spear Automatic was on top, there were very few contenders. In this particular era, it was only Alex and Brett. Carter didn't arrive on the scene just yet. Spear Manual couldn't compete anymore, and Flame Runner was completely out of the question. Automatic is very difficult on this track, and it also has a Chain Chomp pace lock on lap 3 in the Hedge Maze. The run came down to getting as close as possible to the Chain Chomp, and then driving the rest of the run really well, which Alex definitely did in this run. This was a 0.1 improvement over his previous record, while also getting the first 158. Nothing short of historic here. Another reason this stood so long is a bit odd, because it revolves around the flower hop tech coming up here. Long story short, there's a flower hop tech after the hedge maze that can be done if you're holding full right, pause the game, switch to holding full left, and unpause the game, resulting in a brief hop that can be used to cut off a little bit of the flower patch, meaning you don't have to take a wider line heading towards the next straightaway. But the right to left movement needs to happen in one frame, hence the need for pausing. King Alex had an old, rubberless sticked GameCube controller that made the track harder to drive, but also allowed for slightly consistent flower hops without needing to pause buffer. It wasn't foolproof. Alex estimates his consistency was 33% at best, but once he got used to driving the track with the controller, he was able to use this to his advantage. This made him very hard to catch by any other Spear Auto players. Alex was very happy with the 158 and didn't play this track again. Against all odds, Alex's record got beaten by the Flame Runner Revolution. Casey beat Alex with a 158.980 in February 2023, putting Flame Runner solidly in front. Heading to GCN DK Mountain, Logan's current record from 2021 has just surpassed 1,200 days. He has a 158.133 on the glitch category from November 2021. DK Mountain Glitch was his first world record track in February 2018, and he has never lost the record from that point on. This is truly his bread and butter right here. Right away, he got the first 159, took a break, and then got a 158 within a few more months, and that one lasted a long time in its own right. But he finally started feeling a little heat from Darren, which led Logan to play this again, also with a little help from a wheelie cancel strat going down the mountain, and driving it down to this time right here. I know he wanted the 157, but the track started getting really difficult at that point, so he never ended up getting it. At least not yet. When he got this time, there was a 0.8 gap over second worldwide. Now the gap is down to about 0.4, but it's still fairly sizable. The top 10 here is fairly spread out, because there's a lot of inconsistencies with this tracking category. Getting the glitch is no guarantee, but on top of that, you need to get a great recovery by hitting the very edge of the gap going down, and the entire track in general is just a pain. And I didn't even talk about trying to get a chain on the bridge right here. Logan's played this track a long time though, so he knows it like the back of his hand. I don't think Darren plays much if at all anymore, and there's really no one else close who can contend with Logan. I believe this is the one that went the distance over the previous records, because when this track was still in the lower 2-minute ranges, the field was still wide open, and no one had run away with the record like Logan eventually did. I have to think that this one is going to stand until he decides to give this a serious try again. He gave it a shot in 2023, but his glitch consistency wasn't as good as before, so he couldn't finish any runs. I made a deal with Logan in September 2021 that I will buy Minecraft when he gets a 157. Over 3 years later, I still do not own Minecraft. Maybe one day I will. It's all in Logan's hands. On DK Mountain No Shortcut, we once again have Logan with his current record, 204.775, which was set 19 days after his glitch record, so this also just surpassed 1,200 days in duration. No one has ever held both categories on the track for over 1,000 days simultaneously. This is absolutely Logan's most dominant track, and it seems only fitting considering DK Mountain is where it all started for him. Once again, from the time he first got world record here in February 2019, he's never lost it. He had a 205.194 from September 2019 that stood for quite some time, but it was heavily carried by a great mini-turbo cut on lap 3 following 2 weak laps, so it left a lot to be desired. After gaining his current glitch world record, he started playing No Shortcut and made some good strides, even beating his 194 without an MT cut. But then he worked it down to this time with a good MT cut lap 2 and very solid no glitch driving on laps 1 and 3. I believe similar to Delfino Square, the MT cut has shifted the meta on DK Mountain, and it's extremely difficult to perform optimally. Landing on the right pixel so your bike gets shot down right away, and also giving you enough room to drift around the last turn is highly QM dependent. This record can still theoretically be beaten without MT cuts, but I think those days are over. As for why this is still standing, Logan got a deep 204 for his first sub. and created a big gap between himself and second place. Amphis was second with a 205.3. Even today, the gap hasn't really changed. Amphis got a 205.248 in 2023 with an MT cut on lap 3, and I think he could challenge Logan if he were to keep playing, but I'm not sure what he's up to now. I also think ZQ could make a play here, but I don't think he's stoked on the idea. This really leaves no one else to try and contend with Logan. There were some lengthy durations in past years as well, like Doom's 206.265, which happened right before the glitch got implemented, and some of Liam's former times which he periodically came back to improve. Like on the glitch category, Logan hasn't needed to play this again, and he hasn't played it again since setting this time. No one's provoking him, and he has other goals in the game. I think this will only be improved when he wants to give it another chance. Alright, we have Logan one more time for N64 Bowser's Castle Glitch, 220.584. It was the first world record to use the Ultra shortcut in December 2020. The time lasted for 1,017 days. When this was found to be humanly possible, this was definitely considered the hardest glitch. I think Logan was the only one to even try this in late 2020, and his grind to complete it was mostly documented on his Twitch streams. Those streams drew in a lot of viewers, so this was hype-worthy and highly anticipated over those few weeks in December. Logan is extremely good at taking something so complex and breaking down the inputs and their timings, and that's why he's been able to pull off just about every difficult glitch in the game. That was most evident when he was grinding for this, and that's what sets him an echelon apart from most other players. Simply put, this lasted nearly 3 years because no one else wanted to try this. Not only that, but he also established a very strong driving standard right from the start. The glitch setup itself might not have been the fastest ever, but he held it together remarkably well after being the first person to execute it. When the community saw this, even the most avid glitchers saw the run and figured even if they do get the Ultra, they're not going to drive nearly good enough to beat the time anyway. The question of who's going to want to try to beat this was very applicable here. I was in a Discord call with Logan while he was driving this run, and he didn't have a big reaction when he got the initial respawn. He was surprisingly relaxed the whole time because he knew he had it in the bag. And when he crossed the finish line, it was nothing but relief that the journey was finally over. For a year and a half after, Logan was still the only person to even do the Ultra. Core became the second person to pull it off in June 2022, but the run ended as a 232 after getting squished by a thwomp. Lawrence and Zoran became the third and fourth players to make it in July and September of 2023, so it took a long time for even a few more people to make it, and none of them came within 5 seconds of Logan's time. Core would be the one to finally beat the first glitch record with 220.406 in September 2023. Since then, there's been a lot of activity this year, so there are more people at the top who have figured this out, are getting it faster, and are even taking rail cut at the end. So now that the bottle has been cracked open, there's going to be a lot more left to see here. And so we end with N64 Bowser's Castle No Shortcut. This is 231.649 by Zane, which was set in June 2012. Like Bowser's Castle No Shortcut, this category has a very messy history as well, so buckle up for one final history lesson. On June 23, 2012, Jay set what was believed to be a new world record of 231.645 amidst his meteoric rise to number 1 on the players page. 3 days later, Zane sets this time shown here, believed to be second worldwide behind Jay. Zane's goal was worldwide tops, but he also wasn't convinced Jay was legit. A month later, on July 20th, Cole exposed Jay and many other top players for using rapid fire and live replay in their records. Zane's time then became the official world record with a duration of 24 days and counting. This was very underwhelming for him because having someone tell you weeks later that your time is the world record feels nowhere near the same as climbing up the charts and knowing you achieved your goal. In November 2012, Zane got beaten by Nagisa with a 231.621, capping Zane's duration at 132 days, and by now, you know where this is going. 7 years later, Nagisa's times became discounted due to his use of rapid fire. After the missing history got filled in, the duration of Zane's record inflated to 391 days. Shortly after that, Russo X was found to have used live replay in one of his records, thus creating suspicion around his other records as well. As a result, all his records were removed except for a 231.509 that was driven on CTGP. After more world record history was filled in, the duration of Zane's 231.649 increased to a whopping 1,149 days. I can't help but feel bad for Zane because no one had any time to give this record its due credit. It was only recognized as the world record for about 100 of these days. As far as we were concerned, this was just another blip in the world record history, and then it became this long-standing record 7 years later. The run itself doesn't do anything different compared to the records preceding it, and if this was recognized as the record all along without all the cheating, I think this certainly would have been beaten much sooner. Whatever the record is understood to be by the community plays a huge part in how active the category becomes, and the competition would have been a lot different if it weren't for this mess. Officially, the record that beat this one was 231.619 by Fuleg, and unfortunately, his time was never recognized as world record when he got it. The same goes for records by Zane once again, Enmead, Yasha, and a number of other records from Luke before he got the first 230. I hope you all enjoyed this compilation of every Mario Kart Wii track's longest lasting world record in every category. I also hope this helped provide some context behind the records and what the community and competition were like, not only back then, but today as well. I want to extend a huge thank you to everyone who gave me their input regarding the community and various records that were showcased here. I appreciate you all, and this video would not have happened without you. And if you guys have your own thoughts about why some of these records lasted so long, let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.